Good morning, everybody. My layout's called the PRNN, which means Pacific Railway and Navigation Company. It was a real railroad that SP bought in 1916, known as the Tillamook Line. My fantasy starts a little after that. It was their way of seeking out, because SP had it, was to reach Western Washington through Tacoma. The building that I'm in is 40 by 60 feet with a 16-foot open truss ceiling. Was lucky to build this building way back in 2004. And the very first story was for Chooch Enterprises, which I sold a couple years ago. And the second floor is where the layout is. As you go upstairs, this is how you enter the train room. This is all Tacoma. We're going to start with Tacoma, which is not finished on the layout. I've had a lot of help, wonderful guys that have done things that I can't do. COVID was very helpful for me because it allowed me to just jump in and finish. Because I was retired, I built about 50 buildings for the layout, and they're all polyurethane castings with interior details. So this is it. The first thing that you see as you go up the stairs, this part is called Urban Tacoma. Tacoma is divided into two parts. The left part is called Urban Tacoma, and the right part where the pier is called Tacoma Waterfront, where all the industry was. We have three piers, which are wonderful to ship and switch on the layout. We'll see more. They're further along today. On Tacoma Waterfront, you have an up above line of mountains, and this is called Miller's Pass. So from the lower part, it winds around in the other part of the room and eventually climbs to the upper level. And the upper level is not accessible. You just look up at it. This is another shot of it. This is Pier 1. It centers itself around the whole room. There's only one turnout, which divides it from the Northern Pacific to the Great Northern to get to the Spokane station. This is the other side of Pier 1. And so what I've done is built all the industrial buildings so we could start operating as soon as possible. The mountains were made very light out of pink foam and plaster cloth, and then painted and given a shape like the mountain range down in the lower right. So they were quite light. Bob is taking them up in sections. And this is as you look back to the second pier, and you can see the mountains up above. The wonderful thing is I was trying to figure out, how am I going to light the piers? We tried three different methods, one with doors to create a baffle or a valance. We said, well, let's do a riveted bridge. And it allowed us to have separations where you can see in the foreground that there's a light shining down on the piers, but also the lights are on each side of the bridge that light up the mountain area. So there's virtually no glare. A lot of people don't see the bridge when they first walk up the stairs. It was really fun. This is way back in 2005. I wanted to figure out how to lay out the actual layout. And these are very thin cardstock that I cut out into snap track type lengths. And I literally stapled it to the floor so I could get a total feel of where the trackage would be. For example, right in the foreground there, you can see three gray curves. Those are patterns for the track work. Because it's Proto 48, there's a lot of detail that you can put on the track work, but I felt, how can I do it quickly? So we created a pattern that was 8 feet long for the main track. We had three different sizes of ties, one for main track, one for first class siding, and third for industrial siding. So the ties were smaller and different, but it also has all of the ballast cast on the piece, and the mold is straight at 8 feet, but what you can do is curve the mold when you pour the resin casting. But this was a really terrific way to see if the dimensions would work out. And I literally was timing myself by walking around the room, seeing how long it would take to get someplace. The turnouts on the left shot are cast urethane with all the details in the ties and so on. And then, but it's like Snaptrap, we could take that turnout to the workbench and build it there, because I really don't like to work standing up. And so we figured out a way to do that. And it made a real fun way to do the track work. We could lay 8 feet of track in about 40 minutes. This is looking back on the Tacoma area. The foreground pier is Pier 3, and the staircase is on the far right where the yellow wall is. And that's how you enter the room. And then you look back and you can see the bridge structure and so on. But turning around, now we go into what I call the bridge room. And that's showing every layer of levels for the layout. And it all gathers in this corner to show all kinds of bridges that contribute to the main tracks. And this is not done yet. The area that is finished is Spokane. So the PRNN goes essentially from Southern Oregon to Western Washington, Tacoma, and over a pass to Spokane. And then it goes to a staging area that is represented as points east. But there is a staircase that takes you up to Spokane. And as you come to the top of the stairs, you look on the left here where Spokane is. This is a very urban setting. We just finished this, and that's a Z8 on the upper level. There's 2 levels. There's the Great Northern on the upper level, which goes to the GN station. And then on the lower level is the NP Parkwater division, which is a yard. And this is a shot further down the wall there where we can shift out cars. On the other side of the aisle here is a little small community called Palouse. This is an F unit that is going to drop off cars for the yard, and it's a through train, so it'll only take 6 or 7 cars to drop off, and then the switcher on the right will switch them into categories. Each track has its own category. And this track here is the mainline siding. And the right track is the main line. So it takes through trains. And because it's mid-50s, we can play games and have steam locomotives too. This is a shot halfway down the aisle of the Great Northern Station, which is 8 feet long. And it's elevated, which is not prototyped to the actual city, but I wanted to have a dimensional 3D feeling to the whole room. The 2 buildings on the left are actual buildings that were really on the Northern Pacific main track in Spokane, and they're still there today. But on the lower level is the Parkwater Yard, and that shuttles cars for Palouse, which is on the other side of the aisle. And this is at the throat. 134 is shuttling cars. And then the upper part where the GN reefer is, which is an ice storage reefer for the through trains, Great Northern diners and so on. And that gives a lot of operational fun to the whole thing. The freight trains actually went through the GN station area, so they will not necessarily go on the lower Parkwater level. This is on the upper level. There's a dedicated SD9 that switches out through freight trains on the GN and will take out cars for interchange. And it will probably be mostly on a side track waiting for its duties. And this is as it's going out, it's going to go to a building which is far on the right, which is the Spokane Post Office. And it has just dropped off an RPO car for PRNN. It's the only RPO car that PRNN had. And that car is getting stocked for first class mail that would go westward. And the SD9 shuttles it there and then goes back to the station area. The station was built by a father and son team in 1969, Norm and Arthur Hochhalter. And it's just a magnificent building. It took them 5,000 hours to build it. Each window moves. And this is the post office building, which was all laser cut, and the windows all function also. And there is some small interior details, but it gives the feeling of a very active place. In Spokane, there's an area where we had a rip track, and that repairs cars that have brake issues or any kind of small repairs. Sometimes it needs to be repainted, and then this would ship out and be shuttled by the 134 if a car needed to go in there. And this is a freight station that is before the rip track building. And this receives supplies and materials for the rip track and occasional freight duties, but mostly non-revenue type supplies. This is a shot of the whole length, pretty much. It's over 45 feet long, about 4 feet wide, and it's suspended. So the bottom of the left side is 58 inches high off the ground, and we can do multiple levels. I've learned a lot about photography just in the last couple of weeks. The tank car is shot with a Helicon system, which is a multiple layered stacked photo. This was just a test. I wanted to see if I could get full focus on the front truck and the rear truck, but I only took 2 pictures. I wanted to see if it would work, and Helicon really does a terrific job, very, very fast. So this is a Proto 48 example. The wheels are very narrow. The flanges are smaller than most N-scale trains. It stays on the track miraculously, and but it does require you to have pretty good standards on the track, but we can tweak it up pretty easily. These are some of the buildings that are going into Spokane. The upper left is the post office, and the lower right is an actual building that was near the Great Northern Main track called the Minnesota Building. Further down the line, this is the station for Parkwater in Spokane, and it was obsolete as a passenger station, but I use it for crew and agent assignments. And the taxi cab there shuttles the crews around various parts wherever they have to work. But in the background is the other end of the diorama that shows the other structures. So Palouse is on the other side of the aisle, so to speak. The aisle is 4 foot wide, so we can get through okay. And it's a set for a storm coming. So it's really, the colors are not correct on this, but it's lit for yellow on one side and blue on the other. So you get a real dramatic feeling. But this is a snapshot that I took at the last Sound Rail convention. And they had 3 full trains going through Palouse, and they had to figure out how are we going to drop off cars and pick things up. But they figured it out. It was amazing. And then Palouse is just loaded with a 20-track reefer icing station and a cold storage station there for Palouse. And it goes to the other end. You can see way down there in the upper left corner, there's a huge grain elevator, which is probably 80 inches to the top in the air. And to the left of that will be a packing house for Swift and Armor, which was in Spokane, and we're just sort of melding that together. But this layout will be finalized in the next 6 weeks. It's just loaded with former Chooch kits that we did in O-scale years ago. And I just wanted a place to put them. They all have rather nominal interior details. It was just a lot of fun to get them out on the layout. And the GN and the NP go through Palouse, And there's an interchange track that the SD9 will come to and drop off and pick up cars transferring from each railroad. Palouse is just loaded with a little tiny main street. This is the diner. The funny thing about it, there's nobody inside, but there's cars parked outside. And my answer is they're probably all in the bathroom. They got sick from the bad food. And it's lit for night. So there's an upstairs and a downstairs. These are all parts that were original Chooch parts way back that I did in the 70s and 80s. And there's, this was not a kit, but it's a scratch build grain elevator taken out of a 1955 model railroader. I thought the shapes on it are just magnificent. And the one on the left is a corrugated sheathed of the same design, but just a different flavor. And here's the poor S4 switching out cars at Sound Rail, but we got it fixed. And the SP&S Jeep really shouldn't be there, but it's a point-to-point locomotive that really goes from the GN station to Portland through Tacoma. This is a small panorama of the whole scene. As you can see, a storm's coming, and it's the kind of lighting that I always loved, when you have dark clouds in the back and a sunset type effect with the warm light coming on the right side or the back side. And these are 3 buildings. The upper left is our industrial buildings that are behind in the back of the Spokane scene. And the gas station on the left is as you walk up the stairs. It's lit. It's all paper. I laser cut the windows and all the pieces, and it makes it very, very easy. And the gray building is an actual Tacoma building that'll go in the Tacoma urban area. And that's all paper also on the patterns. And then I'll super detail the paper pieces and then mold them in urethane for the super details. The pier buildings are really designed from the same style of building that was in Seattle. And this is the packing house area on the far side of Palouse. It's just pieced together, and we will take that down and install them building by building. They're all lit with nominal interiors. And I just had a really fun time building this. Right in the middle, you'll see pipes that go left to right. They're gray. And behind it is a false front, and one of the looped tracks from East Staging goes through there. You don't see it. It's not made to be in the scene, but it certainly is a good place to double check that everything's on the track. I think that's the last shot.
All the scenes are very believable. I've been to Spokane a few times, and I can recognize a few buildings. And I think you've done an excellent job in the backdrop portrayal of the communities, as well as the foreground details, and the lighting is amazing. The buildings, it's a big challenge to do. I think you said 40 or 50 buildings. That's amazing.
It was a lot of fun. I like to do things in batches. Like we have 3D printed street lamps in the urban scenes. A friend of mine did them, Bruce Barney, down in Portland, and we did 3D printing on them. And I just said, well, let's build them all. So I have 60 in supply, but I find it's just about a time-saving thing to, when you need something, do them in bulk if you need more of them.
Mike, what kind of sound system are you using now? What kind of DCC?
Well, I'm using NCE wireless, and I was waiting for the sound decoders to really be more stable. And I wanted every steam locomotive and diesel to have the same system. I tried WOW, and I decided to stay with them. I just really enjoyed the clean sounds and the simplicity of programming the sounds.
The Proto 48 detail being so nice to see. Is there anyone in in this region doing Proto 87 and HO scale?
Northwest Shortline came out with P87 wheels a number of many years ago, and it was not successful, unfortunately. But they operated just fine, and they actually went through Atlas turnouts very effectively, but it just didn't catch on. There are a couple guys in Europe that are doing it with American Prototype. It didn't catch on at the time. I'd love to see it catch on. Barely Proto 40 got on. So only a handful of us in the country that have modeled in P48.
Did you want to mention that website?
Yeah, go to Google and key in P48 Gene Demling, and you'll get right to his website that shares all kinds of information. And it'll also bounce you to another P48 website too.
Oh, there's a groups.io too. It says
That's
here.
right.
Hey, Mike,
still-
Jack Hamilton,
Yeah.
little did I realize when I first visited you, what you would eventually come to. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. I'm really enjoying it. Thank you very much. Nice to be retired.
Mike, you might mention that Ian Henderson did your backdrops.
Yes, I found a local artist who was loved to paint clouds and mountains, and he's done most of the black backdrops on the layout. Very talented guy. It's fun because I sort of gave him a stack of pictures and said, get this feeling in this. He would take it and go do something better than what I wanted.
A few months ago, I did a clinic for the East Side Clinic on weird scale and gauge things like the British 00, which is also a narrow gauge, Mike, if you remember that. And that had a discussion about the various proto sizes, Proto 48, Proto 4 in the UK, scale 4, and all of those movements on there. So that video has some details in it, which is on our website if you wish to actually have a look at it. And it does talk a bit about the difference between British O scale and American O scale and the difference in the fine scale standards.
This is Jeannie Melvin in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Long time no see. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's been
think you could get any better, but you have gotten better. You're now universal class, not world class. You're just
You're too-
amazing. I'm glad to hear you're doing well.
Thank you so much for your comment. I really am a believer in having a passion and going after it. And it's just been a wonderful time.
Mike, this is Bill Messiker. Could you add a couple comments on what your operating, scheme or plan is? How many operators? And because I think you're going to be open for sound rails, right?
No, not this year. I
Okay.
decided to just back out this time. I'm just not ready. But the layout was designed from a timetable point of view, and that allowed me to figure out where things were going to go. So it was a sort of a backwards way to do it. I had a floor plan of the 40 by 60 foot room, and I used a method that what I call the domino method. Essentially, we built the layout in 4x8 sections and connected them domino effect, and then we could actually just connect it and build the whole layout that way. The other thing is a number of guys showed me when you create your room, select your largest radius that you want your curves to be and just draw a circle for that scale and then just put them in the building, and that'll help you figure out where the curves are going to be and loops and so on. And as a result, I was really fortunate to discover that the whole layout is you are inside the loop, and there's only one area where you are outside a curved or a looped area. So that way it just felt like you gain more room square footage wise in the walkways and so on.
How deep is the area there in Spokane, that yard?
Oh, it's 4 feet wide. The bigger buildings are really cantilevered over the back to a certain degree. And Palouse and Spokane, they can actually stand alone. That could be the whole layout if I'm not able to finish the rest of it, because we can operate The Spokane yard feeds the industries in Palouse. All the finished cars go out from Palouse to Spokane to be shipped out. And then we use run-through trains to pick up and deliver loads and so on.
Getting back to Bill's question, when you did operate, how many operators did you have and what were their jobs?
Well, the only places that were finished for operation at that time was Spokane and Palouse, and we had 6 operators and 2 helpers running trains through the seam. But when the layout's finished, it'll be in the neighborhood of 14 to 16 operators to operate the whole layout. That'll be fun.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. This was really amazing to see.